So I just for our listeners, I just would like to welcome you, Jeff Rosen, District Attorney of the County of Santa Clara, California. I've read also some things about you, and I saw that you lead over 600 attorneys and staff. You take responsibility for the safety of around about 2 million citizens in your district.
Yes.
And you are a man who's known for his better justice reform, right? Mm-hmm. So that's quite a program, and it's quite a responsibility you're taking. And for me, it's a big honor that you are here with me. Thank you very much for taking your time, talking with me, speaking with me. Before we start our conversation, I would like to make a tiny little statement about the actual situation. The podcast takes place at what may be a turning point in history. For the first time since World War II, an European country has been invaded by a hostile army. And I know about your personal history of family. You're talking about that, so that your family was interned into concentration camps. So you have, I would say, quite a connection to the history of Europe as well. And, you know, there is one specific detail. 3 days ago, there was an attack to the television tower of Kiev. And some bomb fragments fell into the memorial of Babin Yar. And the Babin Yar massacre is well known. It was in September 1941. And at that time, within 2 days, 33,771 Jewish citizens of Kiev have been shot by German Nazi troops. And now today we have the bombardment exactly at the same place. So I think it's quite a symbol. It's touching me deeply. And I was thinking about the context of our conversation. And I think thinking about it, I would say it makes even more sense to talk now about what we are going to talk. We will talk about the subject of respect and fairness for everyone. And I think it's a universal subject. What are your thoughts about that?
Sure. I think that when I saw that that Babi Yar had been either intentionally or unintentionally bombed in Ukraine, I kind of contrasted that with Putin saying that he was going to Ukraine in order to denazify the country, but meanwhile then destroys or damages a site where 30 to 35,000 Jews were murdered over 2 days by a combination of German Nazis and also Ukrainians that were sympathetic to the Nazi party and didn't like Jews. Yeah. And so for Putin to claim that he's denazifying the country when he bombed Babi Yar, and the president of Ukraine is Jewish, yeah, and is proudly Jewish and very popular in Ukraine, is just it's sort of Orwellian, is what we would say. There was a very influential book by George Orwell called 1984, and it's almost like, you know, everything that Putin says, the opposite is what is true. And it's partly what's so dangerous about that is people don't know what truth. I just think people are losing the sense of what is truth. Yeah. And people think, well, there's fake news and this is my opinion, that's your opinion. There's nothing other than opinions in the world. There's no facts, there's no truth. And really the way that we function in society, particularly in Western societies, is with truth and facts. And so Putin is really at war with all of those things. And well, I know we're all very concerned about it here, and I know in Europe it's even closer for Europeans that are there. But yeah,
But it's a threat
we
for the
hope for a
whole
better
world.
result.
It's a
Yes.
threat for the whole world. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely it is. It is.
Yeah. And I think it has to do a lot, and this is why it makes sense that we talk now about your subject, about what I said already, respect and justice in the prison system in the United States, specifically. It makes sense because it's a universal thing. I think it's universal that we humans should treat each other with respect. That's very important.
Yes.
Okay, so let's start. Jeff, I became aware of you when I saw your TEDx talk on YouTube, and I was I liked it very much. You talked about the difference between United States prisons and German prisons, and about the question why we have a much lower incarceration rate in Germany and no higher crime rate. And I liked the talk not only because I thought, oh, it's so nice to hear that we Germans are so smart or thing like that. It was more like I thought there is a very fine and deep thought in this talk. And this deep thought is the question whether the idea of a human treatment of prisoners and a serious effort to reintegrate them into society would be maybe better for everyone in this society. So maybe would you like to somehow talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I was very struck by what I saw in Germany. And first, just superficial things jumped out at me, and then they revealed something deeper. So just the superficial things that jumped out were, I went to prisons and the prisoners were wearing their own clothes. So they in America, I'd never seen that. And it also gave the sense of, well, who's an inmate and who works here, who is who. Also, in the prisons, I went to the little lunch kitchens in the prisons where inmates cooked for themselves, and they had knives and forks and pots and pans and things that in our country we would call deadly weapons in the hands of a prisoner, but they cook for themselves. And so I was very struck by that. But then it just revealed something much deeper about what the Germans were trying to do through their prison system, which was truly to rehabilitate an individual so that when the individual came out, they would be able to reintegrate back into the society, and that everything that was happening in the prison was directed towards the prisoner being safely released and being successful. So the other aspect of this was, as inmates were close to being released, they then went to something that in Germany they called an open prison, which we could never say here. In English, people would not like this.
It's like a contradiction, right?
Yes, it's a contradiction, and it sounds dangerous. But the idea was, it's a place where you, during the day, you're supposed to go out and look for a job and look for housing and get ready to go back into society. And at night, you go back and sleep there. And so again, it was sort of a transition from being completely incarcerated to then having some amount of freedom, but not total freedom. And that just seemed sensible and like a good idea. And the other aspects of this, that the prisons that really struck me were, first of all, the wardens, the ones that ran the prisons, were not former jail guards. They were lawyers, judges, psychologists. Like, they came from a professional academic background, not from being a jail guard. In the United States, the wardens of individual prisons are always individuals that started as jail guards and worked their way up. So that was very different. And the idea, I remember hearing this a lot. If when somebody was released from prison, if they then committed another crime or they were not successful, the people that worked in that prison, the psychiatrists, the lawyers, the probation officers, they talked about what happened and why. They felt some ownership, some responsibility for how this person did. And if somebody didn't succeed, essentially they were doing what we would call like a post-mortem. Like in a hospital, when somebody dies, they try to figure out why, not about blame or liability, just. So I thought there, they asked themselves, what could we have done differently to have help this person to be successful? That's not at all done in our prisons. So there's kind of no motivation for somebody for the people that work there to really help someone rehabilitate. So I thought that was fascinating. And then I just heard over and over again about Article 1 of the German Constitution says, the first responsibility of the state is to protect human dignity. And like that would be, I heard that in the same way here that, we say, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men were created equal. Like it over and over again. And of course, when the German Constitution was written, it's in I think 1949, around there. And of course, Germany was occupied at that point by the Western powers. So that Constitution was written heavily under the influence of the United States and Britain and France.
Yeah.
So it's certainly in the shadow of the Holocaust, but it has really broad application in German society, this idea of protecting human dignity. And it's been used in Germany to create much better prison conditions. And then the last thing I would say, there's a lot to say about the German prisons, is they were clean. They seemed like nice places to work. Like it was not an oppressive background. It was not like super stressful or tense. It seemed quite relaxed. And I know that it's a good job to get to work in a prison. It takes several years to go through all the training. The training is focused a lot about psychology and social work, some about protection and security. Whereas in our system, the jail guards are really just trained in security, not in rehabilitation. And so that thing about this, the idea that this was had to be a nice place to work. For the Germans, that was for a few reasons. One was, well, everyone's entitled to human dignity. So you shouldn't have to go to work in a place that is disgusting and awful. So for the people that worked in the prison, their human dignity should be preserved. And for the inmates, the idea was, obvious for the inmates, your dignity needs to be preserved. And I would say, while we had a lot of, I remember we asked the Americans a lot of, how do you know this works? How do you know this is rehabilitative? What are the studies? What are this? Honestly, what we heard from the Germans was, well, here's our, we know that the German crime rate is lower than ours. There's less violence, and you have a lot fewer people incarcerated. But the Germans didn't say, well, we're treating people this way because it's going to give us a lower crime rate. It was, this is how we think people should be treated. Like
Understand.
that's how we, it's sort of more like Kant, the categorical imperative. Like this is what you should do. And that really resonated with me. And it doesn't surprise me that it leads to good results in Germany, but their thought process is this is just how people should be treated. And so I found it fascinating, and is really, I didn't expect to be as interested in prisons when I became the DA, but I'm really fascinated by them and have tried to bring some of what I saw in Germany here.
So what are your conclusions now? What were your conclusions and what were you working on then?
So my one conclusion I had was we need to find a way in the United States to motivate or incentivize individuals that work in the prison to want to rehabilitate the inmates. And in Germany, it's built into how these professionals think about what their role is. Like when I ask a correctional officer or probation officer in the German system, like, what do you think your job is? They would always say, like, I'm trying to help these individuals become better people and become law-abiding. And part of how I do that, they would say, is we role model the behavior that we want them to have. So in normal society, we don't scream at each other or punch each other. We say hello, we say good morning, we say how are, but we're trying to model that. And German prisons, they're much smaller than our American prisons. I mean, we're talking about maybe a few hundred inmates in a German prison, typical. Our system, we have thousands.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, there are a lot more people that are working in the German prison than here. What I mean by that is a German prison that has, say, 300 individuals serving a sentence may have as many as 200 people that are working in some way in the prison. They're a psychologist, they're a cafeteria worker, whatever they are, or they're a correctional officer. And so what that means is that the culture of the German prison is not set by the inmates, but it's set by the people that work here. In American prisons, the culture of the prison is set by the inmates because there are 2,000 of them in a prison, and there are maybe 200 individuals that are working in the prison.
Yeah.
So when you have a setup like that, the culture is going to be what the prisoners set. Even the security for the prison is going to be outsourced to the inmates because there are so many more of them than there are correctional officers. So I thought to myself, what could I bring back here that we could do in this country? And of course, the way I thought about this is I can't come back and say, this is what they do in Germany, it's better, so we should do it. As Americans are very, we're number one here. So
proud country.
Right. And we don't think about whatever. We don't think a lot about what other countries are necessarily doing because we think our way is the best. So what I understood was I need to talk about this in American terms. In America, we say people are entitled to a second chance. We believe in that. So that's a good way to talk about emphasizing rehabilitation and giving people opportunities to reintegrate, is we believe in second chances. We also believe there's an expression, you've paid your debt to society. So you committed a crime, you went to prison for so many years, you're released from prison, you've paid your debt to society. So let's try to give that person a clean start. Germany's very good about that. We have a lot of rules and we put up a lot of obstacles when somebody has been to prison. They can't get certain jobs, they can't get certain government benefits. So I was like, we need to change that. I said the concept of re-entry is something that we should introduce the first day somebody is in prison, not towards the end. Like to start focusing on that right away. The idea of inmates wearing their own clothes, we're doing that for inmates in our jail the last 30 to 45 days of their sentence, assuming they've been doing well. They go to a part of the jail where they can wear their own clothes. So we're getting there, but honestly, I think what's hard here is that some people, their idea is, let's just get rid of the jail. That's how we'll solve this. Like, yes, the jails we have are ugly and disgusting, so we shouldn't spend money to make them better. We should just get rid of them. Okay, that's just not going to work.
Doesn't going to work.
It's to try to convince people that it's worthwhile, that it's a good return on investment to spend money on the prisons and to make them better places. And Germany gets that, and I know Germany's much like the Scandinavian countries, and we're getting part of that here. Like, we're starting to understand that just having a lot of people in prison is not necessarily going to make us safer. So we're understanding that, but I don't think that we're yet fully investing in the idea of rehabilitation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jeff. I saw this very nice little movie you have on your webpage, and I took out some quotes of that. And you call this criminal justice system what you want to reform. And you call the reform a reform with the aim of remaking the system of justice for being more fair, more effective, and more respectful for the entire community. Yeah. So what are the specific measures you can do to achieve these wonderful, beautiful sounding goals?
Yes, what we have done to try to reform the system, make it more fair, be more respectful. One is to change the footprint, to shrink really the parts of the criminal justice system, specifically to use jail less often. Another way I've expressed this is sometimes we've used our jail for people that we are angry at, which is different than using the jail for people that are dangerous and we are afraid of. So sometimes we've used our jail. Someone keeps doing the same low-level crime over and over, and we get angry and put them in the jail. Yeah. And for these kinds of low-level property crimes, there's other ways that we can try to hold someone accountable and try to help them address their underlying issues, which are usually drug abuse and mental health problems. So one way of reforming the system is making it smaller. And our system in the US, we have a lot of what we call disproportionalities in our criminal justice system. So in my county, people that are Black are about 3% of my county, but are 10% of the defendants. So more than 3x disproportionate. Latinos, Hispanics are 25% of my county, but 50% of the people incarcerated. Whites are about 30%, and they're about 30% of the the jail. And Asians, we have a lot of Asians in our county, and they're like 35% of our county is Asian, but only 10% of the defendants are Asian. Okay, so those disproportionalities, which predominantly affect communities of color that are what we call Black and brown, what I have found is it's very difficult, almost impossible, to significantly change those percentages. But you can reduce the number of people that are incarcerated overall.
Yeah.
So there's different. So I've supported changes to the law that reduced a lot of crimes from felonies to misdemeanors, which then reduced the jail and prison population. I supported laws that we had something called the 3 strikes law, because baseball is our national sport, and we narrowed the 3 strikes law, and that led to a lot of people being released from jail and prison. So what it did is the jail in my county used to have about 5,500 people in it. Today it has 2,400, so less than half. So is the glass half full or half empty? So I think, wow, that's really good. Mm-hmm. But the racial percentages are the same. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So one way to reform the system and to make it more fair is just to make it smaller in some ways. Mm-hmm. If your measurement is to try to change the racial makeup, that's very difficult, because the criminal justice system it's like the last station on the train tracks, where somebody is born, what their family's like, what their school was like, is already racially unfair in our country. And it's hard to change things at the end of the system if you don't do it at the beginning. So one way is to shrink the system. Another way to try to be more fair is to be open about mistakes that are made by prosecutors and police officers. This is a human system. We don't always get it right. And so we have prosecutors and investigators whose assignment is to review our cases, our old cases, and make sure we got the right person, make sure the trial was fair, and if not, to release those people from custody. So we've done that, which we're trying to change the mindset in the DA's office, that our role is not just filing the crimes and convicting someone, but it's also making sure that things were fair even years later. And then the last piece about this is what's called prosecutor-led resentencing, where we helped to pass a law here that gives a prosecutor the ability to recall an inmate from prison, bring them back, and ask the judge to resentence and release the person.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And so we've started to do this because some people were sentenced too harshly, and they have changed and rehabilitated, and they're safe, and there should be a mechanism to release them. Yeah. So these are some of the ways that we've tried to make the system more fair.
Fantastic. So there are now so many questions popping up in my head, so I have to decide now which direction we will follow. But I hope I will get it all finally. Maybe just what you said in the end about the mistakes, making mistakes, being more open to making mistakes at the prosecutor's level. My impression, but it's only an impression from outside, is that in the United States there is kind of prosecutors have to win cases because this will boost their careers, and if they would admit to mistakes, it would somehow it may bring difficulties because it's jeopardizing their careers, and so they are somehow very reluctant to reopen cases or things like that. What is your impression on that, or how could we change the system here?
Yeah, I think that there is some of that. what you said. One, we have what we call an adversarial system between the defense and the prosecution. And sometimes people just naturally, if they won a conviction, they're personally invested in that. And that's, I'll tell you what we do to try to change that, but people are personally invested in that, which is very human.
Yeah, it's a psychological phenomenon. Yeah, it's true.
Psychologically, they rationalize. And we want, to the extent people our prosecutors are personally invested, we want them to be personally invested in justice, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
And so there is a little bit of a mentality about winning. In addition, prosecutors, the head prosecutor, like what I am, is elected. So this is different in Germany. I know that the prosecutors are appointed, not elected.
Yeah.
And I run for office. So for a long time, a good way to run for office was to say, I'm tough on crime and I win all my cases. So there was a political reason for that. And, I think that that's changing. Look, every part of the U.S. is a little bit different, but I just have always felt that if you're honest with people, they appreciate that. And so I just felt like to admit that we have made a mistake, that means that we're human, and that now, I think there's two questions somebody should ask. Okay, good, you admitted you made a mistake. Now, what are you going to do to fix it?
Yeah.
So, and I accept that. That's why, what are we going to do to fix it? So one way of fixing a mistake in a conviction is to have the person released. But then really the deeper question is, what are you doing as the DA to make it less likely that someone will be wrongfully convicted in the future?
Yeah.
So to be more proactive, we then, we look at, on these 10 cases where we think we convicted the wrong person, or we think the trial was not fair, what was the cause of that? And it comes down to things like eyewitness identification, coerced confessions, jailhouse informants. So, then we take steps to change our practices. And one thing that's important, Constantine, is to change the practices. I'm not the police. I'm the prosecutor. And so for a lot of this, I need to convince the police to change what they're doing. So what I've learned in my life, I didn't know this right away, is if you want people to change what they're doing, don't call them racist. Don't say they're idiots. Don't talk down to them.
Yeah.
They're trying to do the job as best they can. Yeah. So you have to kind of come at this with you're a really good police officer, and I know you want to do your job as well as you can. So here are some ways that maybe we could do our jobs even better. So I think that for where I work as the DA, there's a lot of very innovative, high technology companies. So I'm in the Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Well, so I'll use a German word, the zeitgeist here. See if I'm using it right. The zeitgeist, I would say the ethos is you try different things. If it fails, that's okay. You learn something, try something different.
Yeah.
That's how private industry thinks about things here. Government is hesitant to do that because if you admit you made a mistake, maybe you're voted out of office. So I think I've been fortunate to live in an area where the people are a little more open to trying new things that don't succeed. and then trying something
Yeah.
else. So I think that's how I thought about
Mm.
what we call conviction
Yeah.
integrity.
Yeah, okay, but I think also it needs some courage also to take those steps. I can imagine. I mean, you are now in office since 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So now you're well established. But I can imagine in the first years there was a lot of courage to be taken, right? To do.
It was,
So how do you take from where do you take that?
well, you know, okay. I'll tell. I will explain. I will explain the method
Okay.
that I use. The method. So, honestly, one method is humor, okay? And many of the things we have done, conviction integrity unit is a good example. When we started it, other prosecutors, other police officers said, "This is crazy. This is you're a leftist. You're a hippie. This is so wild and weird." And when I would talk to groups about this later, where others are doing it now, and I'd say, people say I'm a hippie, I'm a this, I'm a that. Look at me, okay? I always wear a suit. I mean, I'm always wearing a suit and tie. I said, look at me. I look how boring I am. I drive a Camry. I drive a gray Toyota Camry. Okay. I have 2.2 children. Like, I am completely boring and conventional. I'm not a revolutionary. So that's part of it. I did not, when you do something new and different, sometimes the best thing to do is dress it up like it's old. And it's something we've always done, or something we used to do in the good old days.
Yeah.
So I would, because I'm the DA, because I was a deputy DA for many years and prosecuted all kinds of crimes, I had a certain credibility that I'm not soft on crime, and I believe in accountability, and I know we'll talk about that later if free will is possible.
Yeah.
But I believe in that, and so I was a better messenger because I don't have pink hair and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, and that's something I've used over and over again to play against type. Like, people would say, well, the DA works with the police and likes the police and wants the community and doesn't like criminals. So this is probably a good idea. He's not crazy. And, to be truthful, like, hey, this is who I am. Like, I'm not, like, I don't view what I'm doing as crazy. I view it as like very sensible and pragmatic. But I also had this idea I've just seen in other ways, like, in a religious context, sometimes religious traditions that are doing something very new and different dress it up in an old way. And I've seen that in the Jewish community in a number of things. So that's kind of how I've done these things. And, look, in some sense, it helped me, honestly, today, where it's more problematic for me is things have moved very far left in some sense in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And so people look at me and they're like, well, you're not really a reformer or a progressive. Why? Because I wear a suit and tie. I was a prosecutor, and I don't scream F the police. So and I'm not going to.
So it seems that you're a person who's don't want to fit into some stereotypes or things like that. And
it's better. I think it's always better for an elected official to be. It's not that I'm trying to be mysterious, but for people not to put them in a certain box.
Yeah.
For some people to say, oh, I think Jeff's a real reformer. And other people might say, well, he's a very traditional prosecutor who works to bring crime down. It's fine.
So if it fits for them, yeah. So you pick
Fine.
them up from there where they are. So we say this, I don't know whether it translates from German, but we say pick somebody up from the point where he is at and take him at the hand and bring him to a new place, something like that.
Yes, yes. I think that's very important to try to make change, is to try to find where you and someone else agree, and or some basic principles you agree on, and to try to grow from there.
So find the common ground.
To find the common ground, and also, like, I'm not an absolute person, so I think that if I get 60-70% of what I'm trying to get, and the other person gets 60-70%, wonderful, But I meet people that, like, if we don't agree 100%, they don't want to have anything to do with me. It's like,
Okay.
That's just not how I think about things.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Jeff, you were talking about this composition of races in the prisons and how you try to change it and how hard it is. I come from partly also from a business world. I'm a business coach, and we are teaching leaders to lead by goals and to measure those goals with KPIs. And we distinguish between leading and lagging indicators. So the lagging indicators are more like, did I achieve my goal? So did I achieve my goal to change the percentage of the racial composition? And there are, on the other side, leading indicators. They are more looking into the future. So what can I do today in order to have a better future? And I learned that you have changed the composition of in your staff, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
And this is for me, from my point of view, it's a leading indicator. So it's something you do today. You don't see the output tomorrow, but maybe you see the output in 1, 2, 3, or 5 years.
I think that the most important, honestly, one of the most important things that I do as DA is who I hire and who I promote and who I discipline, who I fire. And it's very hard. I'm sure it's like Germany. Very hard to fire someone in the public sector here. But so, and if I hire and promote good people, then I can go play golf today. Like, it's all going to take care of itself. If I hire people that aren't good and I promote the wrong people, I am completely screwed. Like, there's nothing I can do. So we spend a lot of time trying to hire good people. And there's an urge, I think, for people that lead organizations. There's an urge to want to control everything. And part of how you succeed as a prosecutor in business is you take responsibility, you take control. But in this profession of being a prosecutor, so we've got, a staff of 640, we've got more than 200 are prosecutors. There's thousands of cases every year. You can't be everywhere at once. You're really trying to teach people judgment and direction, and you want them to develop. And so my mindset is really, I think there was what we call low-hanging fruit, easy changes to make when I was first elected. And I think the office is better now than it was 10 years ago. However, what I'm really trying to do is that when I retire, when I do something else, that 10 years after I retire, the office is better. Not that it fell apart. It fell apart.
Very good.
And I didn't set it up for success. So we spend a lot of time on who we hire, and the composition, really, our office was much whiter than our community. And so the question is, do we need the office to look more like the community? I think yes, because Number one, I think that there are people that can be terrific prosecutors, whether they're white, black, Asian, Latino, Jewish, Muslim, whatever. And I don't think only white men are the only people that can be prosecutors. So one is, it's just, I want to avail myself of all the talent that is here.
Yeah.
Second, for better or worse, people have more trust in institutions that look something like they do. And I say for better or for worse because, in some sense, I feel like we're getting obsessed with people's skin color in our country, in an unhealthy way. Mm-hmm. But I do think I make better decisions when the people sitting around me don't all look like me. Yeah. So to be honest, Constantine, like, it's not that I think I'm stupid or not smart, but I've never thought of myself as the smartest person in the room. I just never have. And I really benefit from hearing other people's perspectives. So I think it just makes us a better organization. And the last thing I would say about this is I never talk about quotas, or I need so many of this group or so many of that group. I always talk about excellence, and we in Silicon Valley, we are a place that's marked by excellence and diversity. Yeah. And those that's not an accident. The diversity that we have here, draws excellent people, and the excellence, draws a diverse group. They reinforce one another, and it's very exciting for me to see the staff that is much more diverse than when I started, and it makes me hopeful about our country, because I think there is a sense by some that if you are a certain color, you should act and think a certain way. Okay. And
again, a stereotype.
The stereotype. There's a stereotype. So on the one hand, there's a stereotype that if you're black or if you're Latino, that you should not like the police. And I think that's totally untrue. And I think that comes from the left end of this political spectrum. And from the right end of the spectrum, there's a fear that as our country becomes more racially diverse, it's going to fall apart and people don't care about law and order and things like that. And that's also totally not true. And I have all these prosecutors that are black or Hispanic or Asian that are, very patriotic and love this country. And so I just find it very hopeful for the future of the United States.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jeff, you mentioned before that you think we shouldn't imprison people because we are angry at them, but maybe better because we are afraid of them. And this directly leads me to my philosophical question about free will. I would like maybe to introduce it briefly. So there is, let's say, the recent findings in brain research more and more suggest that free will does not really exist. I already know you have maybe a different point of view on that, but let's discuss about it. And simplified, it is assumed that our actions are the result of internal control circuits that react to external influences, more like that. Yeah? And for me, so interesting is this philosophical question about is free will a central starting point of argumentation for the judiciary? So there is this idea that individual persons make free, evil, bad decisions independent of the world. They just have now I do this, I will do something evil. And therefore, it is just that he atones for his crimes. So it's more this idea of atonement. It's an idea of he has to compensate somehow his crimes. He has to pay back, something like that. There are philosophers who argue that the basic assumption of free will is not necessary to have a functional criminal justice system. The guiding idea would be more the protection of general public. And I think it would help us not to be angry anymore so much. We don't have to hate people for what they did. We could deal with them in a much more pragmatic way. And it would be more about protection of the public, maybe also what you call the deterrent effect, right? We need some certain deterrent effect. And we could focus more on the rehabilitation of prisoners. So what are your thoughts on that, Jeff?
That's such a great question. And I have thought about this. I think that where I've thought about this, a few different places, but one is for sex crimes. Mm-hmm. So in our system, molesting children or rape, very stiff, harsh sentences. Those crimes, let's talk about molesting children. For individuals that molest children, there's a subgroup that are what we would call pedophiles. They are sexually attracted to children.
Yeah.
And so we vilify them, like this is, horrible, a taboo, a horrible thing. We prosecute them seriously, very vigorously. When they get out of custody, if they get out of custody, they have to register with the police, and everybody has to know where they live. And and the reasoning behind this is, well, they are very likely to recidivate, to commit these crimes again if they have the opportunity. All right. It's the best example for the point you're raising, because who you are sexually attracted to is very deeply embedded in you. Like, here, I don't like mayonnaise. Okay. I really don't. I'm never going to eat mayonnaise. I hate it. Can't. Okay. How much more so for sexuality? So we're punishing people who perhaps cannot change. And what do we do then? Like, we're getting angry at them. I mean, not only are we afraid of them, but we're really angry because we're like, you got to change yourself. And yet, how can they? And I do think that the harm reduction idea is something that we kind of think about that we sort of embrace a little when it comes to sex crimes. And I think that the best argument for incarcerating or separating pedophiles is harm reduction, because it's very hard for us to change their behavior, how they're wired. So I do think that there is a subgroup of crimes that individuals for whom I don't know how much free will they're really exercising. So I grant that there's a kernel of truth in what you say. The way I think of it more is not that people have complete free will. And by that, and the reason I say that is, I grew up in a middle class neighborhood. So the fact that I didn't join a gang and is not a big accomplishment or achievement. Okay. The worst thing that happened in my neighborhood, worst thing, is kids smoked and used marijuana.
Yeah.
So the question for me was not, am I going to join a gang? It's, am I going to use marijuana? That was the extent of the choice. Someone else growing up in a very crime-ridden neighborhood with a lot of gangs, the choice for them is different. If they don't, that's a big deal if they don't join a gang. And that is an act of free will. So I sort of think that I guess I would say people do. I would still say people have free will. It's just more. It's more limited than we think it is. It's the range of choices is smaller, and so to act like, oh wow, you joined a gang, you're horrible. I didn't join a gang. Well, that would be like me saying, oh, you're horrible because you smoked marijuana when you were in high school. Okay, so I do. I do think there's an element of harm reduction and pragmatism, which is helpful. But honestly, it's I can't totally give up free will. Like I sort of feel like I believe it's in many respects. To me, it's the basis of the system that we are holding people responsible for their choices, trying to recognize what the range of their choices really are given their circumstances. But nonetheless, not everyone that grows up in a bad neighborhood. In fact, most people do not join gangs, even if they grow up in a bad neighborhood. So it's hard to, it's a little like, and maybe Christianity has this too, like, right, in Judaism, we have free will, but God knows everything that's going to happen, and so, and yet we say those are both
point,
true, even though they're in conflict. So I would partly, I think, a little of this is a cultural difference, perhaps, or certainly, let's say, a little bit unique to the United States. We're a very individualistic country.
Yeah.
So we love people that brought themselves up from nothing, just based on their hard work and their individual work ethic and ingenuity. Yeah. We love rehabilitation stories here. We love the person that screwed up, but then through their hard work and determination, turned themselves around. I think this is very deeply embedded in the American psyche. And at the same time, there definitely there is a subculture of, and I would say this comes from, I think more maybe liberals, like, what do you expect? He grew up in a bad neighborhood. He didn't have the same opportunities. So you can't, I don't want to say you can't blame him. You have to take that into account when you're deciding what the punishment or accountability should be. Yeah. So I think it's a fascinating question.
So maybe we could distinguish between, let's say, a philosophical point of view about what we maybe believe here also somehow, and a pragmatical point of view. So how do we really need it for a justice system? And my impression is that you anyhow already are turning more in direction to focusing on protecting the citizens, rehabilitating the prisoners, and forget about hating them or being so angry on them, right?
We are, and I am, but sort of like I said before, I'm moving in that direction, but I still believe in accountability, right? So if I talked only in this way of harm reduction, I wouldn't be it would not be accepted by people that are more conservative. So I do think we're moving in that direction. But to make it, I'm not just saying I'm making it palatable for Americans. It's also what I believe. I mean, I do believe in accountability, but I also, this thing about anger, part of why you become a prosecutor, I think, is that you don't believe in mob rule and vengeance and anger as directing punishments, and that you are more thoughtful and deliberative about it. So I found I prosecuted all kinds of crimes, terrible crimes. Being angry when I did it was not more persuasive to jurors. It was not more persuasive to judges, and So even though there are some people in our society, particularly in the United States, that like to get angry, that's never gonna be me. Like, we've got a guy here recently, just a couple days ago, a man is accused of molesting a child. This man was released from custody by the judge before trial. We objected. The father of this child, who was a former mixed martial artist, fighter, chases this man in his car 100 miles an hour. So that's like, 140 kilometers an hour, which is fast here. I drove on the Autobahn. That's not fast on the Autobahn. You guys drive really fast. But he chases him on the freeway, shoots him, misses him, hits somebody else. And I have all these people that are emailing me, let this man out. It was his child. That's terrible. Like, of course a father should do this. And it just is vigilantism. And I don't believe in this. And the irony of this, by the way, which no one has mentioned, the man's name that chased this other and shot and fired, his name is Cain, like Cain and Abel, like the Cain that killed Abel. Okay, that Cain. Okay, the first murder in human history.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I think the anger is not. It's not it's. I wouldn't just say it's not productive. It's not who we're trying to be. It's like the Germans just want human dignity. Like, I want that too. Like, I'm going to treat you with respect. It doesn't mean I'm not going to prosecute you and you don't have to go to prison for a long time, but you're still a human being. You need to be held accountable. I want you to have an opportunity to turn things around and change your life. But part of that is punishment, is reflection. And part of it is protecting the rest of the society by temporarily removing you, which is the more pragmatic thought about it.
Okay, let's keep talk about accountability, because accountability also can be seen on the positive side. Yeah, and I think accountability has a lot to do with the possibility to have a rehabilitation. You have to take responsibility for your own rehabilitation. You have to take accountability for turning around, right? And this brings me to Viktor Frankl. I mentioned him already also, and I'm a big fan of Viktor Frankl. He was a great person. He was a Austrian Jewish psychiatrist, very famous. He founded an own school of psychiatry. It's called logotherapy in German, at least. He made this horrible experience also in the concentration camps, but really in the very worst ones in Auschwitz and so on. And he wrote this very impressive book about this experience, and it is so impressive but also encouraging, because he was able to find, let's say, meaning or purpose even in this situation. And this is really a big achievement to find it in such a situation. And he somehow developed his whole school of thought out of this experience, that you can find meaning and how important it is to find meaning in your life. And he treated people who were depressive, but also people who were in prisons and so on, and helped them to find meaning in their life. And then this helped them to turn their whole life around. So, and this is why I think it's so important to do rehabilitation programs, because I think people in prisons have lost their whole self-worth or self-esteem, right? So we should help them. It's better also for the society, right?
Yeah, the title of his book in English that you're referring to is Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's similar in German.
It's a little bit different, but yeah.
A little bit different. And I think that I find prisons and jails very interesting, and talking to the individuals there very interesting, because they're in this new society. They've been removed from society. They're in this different society. They might know they're going to be there the rest of their life, or maybe the rest of their life, and they have to decide, what do I want to do? And some people just kind of do nothing. They don't really, they're not introspective. They don't try to change. They just they don't do anything. But there are some, what fascinates me, that take this opportunity to think about what they did, why they did it, and what they need to do differently, and how they need to think differently. Yeah. And there was an inmate, a man that I was talking to, someone that we released early from prison. He'd committed a number of armed robberies when he was, I don't know, maybe 20 years old. And he'd been in prison about 10 years. I think he had another 10 years. For various reasons, we released him early. He's doing well. And one of the things he said is, when this law changed that allowed for resentencing, he's like, I applied for it, but I didn't really think about whether I was going to get released early or not. I was in a mental state where this is what he said, like, my meditation is strong. I'm just going to continue to work on that. I'm getting my degree in this subject. I'm working on my writing. I'm doing this. I started this program in the prison. He's like, he'd gotten to a place where he had found meaning in what he was doing. And that really changed his whole experience of prison. And he even said, again, like, there's some people on the very far left that just want to say prison's horrible and it makes you worse and it's terrible. And okay, and there are aspects of prison like that, particularly in our country. But he found a place, he found a prison where he could start changing himself, and he's a different person. And that idea, see, part of why I hold on to free will so much is I want to really credit this person that he started to make different choices. And by the way, of course, I understand if we had him in a prison with no programs and horrible and violent, that's going to be really hard for him to change. Humans are social. So he eventually was able to get himself to, like, the Harvard of our prisons, which in California is San Quentin. Like, it's has a lot of programs. It's in San Francisco. It's in the Bay Area. It's like on some of the most expensive real estate here. Like, it's a nice place. And once he was there, now he's around other people that are working on themselves and changing, and that makes it easier. So I think this concept of meaning is very powerful. And if it was simple, like, I'd want to give a pill to everyone to have this. But once these people I talk to in prison, because this is what I talk to them in prison about, like, what do you do all day? Like, what do you, and the ones that are successful have found something that is meaningful to them. And often, not always, but often it involves in some way helping other people. And so that, I think, like, I think if your goal in life is to be happy, you won't be. Okay. But if your goal is you want to try to help somebody else, you'll also find happiness in that. And so I feel like the individuals that I've met that have been successful found meaning, and often it was to try to help someone else.
Yeah.
So I think that's important.
This person who you mentioned is in the Harvard prison. Has he been released meanwhile?
Yeah. So
okay, great.
He was he was released about a year ago. He's becoming a computer coder.
Mm-hmm.
He's doing software engineer. He's doing very well.
Great.
But I was just struck by when he thought he had another, like, it's not like he was waiting, holding his breath to be released. He's like, I thought it could happen this year. It could happen in 10 years, but
fantastic.
Whatever happens, this is what I'm doing now.
I maybe I could talk to him also as well.
Yes.
Would be fantastic.
Isaiah Love.
Let's see.
Yeah,
great. So let's talk about this possibility of resentencing also. Sorry. I would like to go on a little bit with this meaning thing, because I know you have started projects, and maybe let's talk a little bit about that. You have this very impressive Pause for Life project, which gave meaning to some people and really helped them change their whole life, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like, I'm not a big animal person, but I've really seen the power that animals have on helping people change, which is so interesting. Like, just philosophically, this idea that a lower life form, okay, a not as advanced life form, can help us change and become better. So I met this man, John Grubman, who had started this program in prison, and
as a prisoner still at that time.
First, he started it. He was a prisoner when he started it, and nobody in the prison really believed that he was going to be able to bring dogs in and they were going to train the dogs. They thought it was like a joke. Like it wouldn't happen. Yeah. And when he said the first day it did, and I don't know, 5 dogs, 10 dogs came, it just transformed a number of the inmates. Like, oh my God, there's dogs here. There's something else I can take care of. Yeah. And like their responsibility was to train and teach these dogs to become service dogs for others. And of course, it had a very powerful effect on John, but it was really a huge change for the inmates. And then everybody wanted to be in this program. And so that creates very positive incentives in the prison in terms of what you have to do to get into this program. So now people have a goal. They have something meaningful, something they want to do. And he's whatever he does now. He does this. He's been released. He does this on the outside. He goes back into prisons. He then delivers the dogs to people that are blind and hearing impaired. But it just there's different ways that people realize they're human beings, and some people realize it through religion. Some have someone in their life, and for some people, it's animals help them recognize their humanity. And so I've been very supportive of this, and it's just it's nice to show our prosecutors examples of people that are changing their lives, so that we don't become very jaded and cynical.
It's very impressive also, because I think there is always a discussion also in the United States of the danger, of these prisoners if you let them out and they will go around and do another harm and so on. And am I right that you have a 0% how you call it, recidivism rate in this program?
Recidivism. So the people, if you ask the person, the man on the street, this is an expression. If you ask the average citizen, Is crime higher this year than it was last year? And this is a poll that's been asked for 30 years in this country. Always a majority of people say crime is, if there's more crime this year than last year. And usually that's not true. And if you ask people, if you say, do prisoners who are released from prison usually commit a crime after they're released? Most people will say yes, even when that's not true.
Yeah.
So that's why it's very important for me to try to educate our prosecutors about people that have been successful, and the public as much as I can. There's always going to be, there's just, because of how human beings are wired, there's always going to be more interest in the rapist who got out of custody and committed another rape. That people are going to go crazy about that. There won't be as much interest in the rapist who was released and is now running a small business and is married and successful. It's harder to get the newspaper to write that story.
Yeah.
And even when they do, it's not as addictive. It's not as powerful as the other story, which just means, we have to be committed to this.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Jeff. Now, I would like to go onto this subject of the possibility of resentencing, what you have now in your county. And you know that I'm involved in this case of Ronald Sanford.
Yes.
Unfortunately, he's not in your county. He's in a very different place in Indiana State Prison.
Yes.
And so this is a man, and he impressed me so much. I saw this BBC documentary, and he's a man, he is now since 35 years in prison. He's now almost 50 years old. He committed a crime when he was a child, when he was a boy, 13 years old. Yes, it was very brutal. It was really a severe crime, but he was a child. So how is your position to such a type of practice, to incarcerate somebody for the rest of his life after such a situation?
So I read about this case, and I've thought about these kinds of cases, and so a few things. One, we know that after men are 40 years old, they're just much less violent, and it's unlikely that they will commit violent crimes. It's just, and that's just the truth. Less testosterone, less whatever. I mean, I just think of myself, I'm 54. Like, how much do I want to fight with somebody now? I don't have the energy. So we know that. We know that how you think as a 13, 14, 15, we know that men are not thinking as maturely as they are until they're in their mid-20s. We know that.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, and I hear this all the time, which in some sense is an argument for, okay, a violent crime committed by a teenager, yes, they're not going to be fully developed until they're in their mid-20s. Yes, maybe that's the time to incarcerate them, but in a harm reduction kind of way. But somebody in their 50s, like, we know they're not dangerous in that way. I mean, and given that you have a 13-year-old who's now 52 or however old, they're likely two very different people.
Yeah.
And so the way I think about this is, one of the elements that I think we don't talk about when we talk about criminal justice process is time.
Yeah.
And here's what I mean. A horrible crime, a 13-year-old, we're not prosecuting as an adult here. So let's say it's a 17-year-old that commits a horrible crime. Okay. And they're caught within a couple days. All right. The community is now I'm in the time I'm in now is the community is outraged. A horrible crime was committed by a 17-year-old. We're scared, we're frightened. We want justice. We want people to know that these are the rules and they will be followed. So at this point in the process, I think as the prosecutor, what I should be focused on is accountability, justice in a strict sense, public safety. Mercy and second chances is not my primary focus right now. Okay, now there's a trial, there's a conviction, that happens a few months later. I'm still, the person's been convicted. All right, so now there's some accountability. We know they're convicted. So now maybe I'm thinking a little bit more about mercy, a little more, but still, this is still in the accountability, strict justice phase. The person sentenced, let's say, for 40 years. Okay, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, it's different. It's different time, different considerations. The community has been satisfied to some extent that there has been justice. If this person did something wrong, they were held accountable. They have been incarcerated for a while. And now there's some space, some emotional space, some intellect, some mental space to sit back and say, okay, now who is this person 20 years later? Have they changed? And so to me, it is not inconsistent to say what after, in the months after the crime was committed, we need strict justice. But 20 years later, we can think more about mercy and rehabilitation, second chances. And so I think what just I found missing a little bit on both of these ends is I have people on the far right that are like, throw away the key, lock them up, throw away the key. And like, well, for somebody who's 50 or who's 60, I mean, we know they're not dangerous. Like, what interests are we protecting? I mean, is there something, did they try to kill the president? Like, is there some other reason, which there might be? So on the right, I sort of have that conversation. And I also say, because sometimes people on the right are very religious, and I'm like, isn't there, what's the Christian, what's the religious view here that this person's changed? And then on the left, sometimes I'll hear, you can never prosecute a juvenile as an adult. Never. It's like, well, okay, I agree with you that the person shouldn't be in custody for life for a crime they committed as a juvenile. But you really think it's okay that in our juvenile system, somebody's out in a couple of years? You really think that's enough time? Do you really think our community is going to think that that's justice? Like, that is a little bit, now people are maybe thinking about being a vigilante. So I think that the element of time, and I think for the Sanford case, well, you undoubtedly know more about it than I do. We have had cases here, and our laws have changed such that this person, Sanford, like, let's say he was even 17 when he did this, not 13. He would be eligible for parole after 25 years. I'm not saying he necessarily would get out, but he would be eligible. And probably in most places in California, he would be released at some point. I'm guessing that the people he killed, I'm guessing that they're white. I don't know if they are.
Yeah, they were white ladies.
Okay, so
elderly ladies.
That's always the original sin of our country is the racial element as well.
So, and Ronald is now eligible at the age for parole at the age of 99. So that is his.
That's when he's eligible for parole.
Yeah.
That's not. That's a little bit like, there's an old joke here. The judge sentences the guy to 150 years in prison, and the guy says, "There's no way, Judge, I can serve 150 years in prison." And the judge says, "That's okay, just do the best you can." Okay.
Yeah.
So,
To the best you can. Yeah.
eligible at 99 it's a death sentence.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's true. Do you have, I don't know, I know it's a different, very different state. Do you have any idea what could be done to help this person? What can he do? Or
yeah, is it Kentucky? Is that where he is?
no, it's Indiana.
Indiana.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what I've had some influence on other prosecutors that I know, either in California or other places, as they have influenced me. You know, I'm not.
Yeah.
Others have very good ideas also.
Mhm.
I honestly do not know any of the elected prosecutors from Indiana,
Yeah.
and so I would not be, I don't know, welcomed or, um, but to me, this seems like um, a case where I would talk to the elected prosecutor in this county,
Yeah.
and I'm sure people have. I know this case has gotten a lot of publicity. Um, Sometimes 60 Minutes, that's a news show here that's very popular, does stories that are helpful. Um, I mean, I think that, I mean, I know how I would approach it. I mean, which is just emphasizing, obviously, how young he was, how sorry he is, how much he has changed. If he's become religious, I emphasize that. Um, and I wonder if the relatives of I would want to know what the relatives of the victims think. It's
Okay.
often very surprising. You know, yes, sometimes they're like, yeah, I want him to die in prison, but not always.
Mhm.
And you know, I think that if the victim's relatives in this case said it's enough time, or you know, we've moved on, you know, that might make it a little
Yeah.
easier for the
Okay.
prosecutor or the
Mhm.
judge. So no, Indiana is a little, don't know.
Far away, huh?
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I have, I mean, you know, whatever, it's just not a, whatever. It's a big country. And one thing I was so struck by in Germany, it was also a big country, is you have a federal system like that. It's sort of one system, and it tends to be more consistent
Yeah.
from region to region. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Our system is the opposite. It's meant really for things to be a little different in California than they are in Georgia. And there's some advantages to our system. There's some strengths to that, and there are some weaknesses.
Mm.
And so, you know, I think one of the strengths in Germany is like if the country says this is the kind of justice system we're going to have, then that's the kind of system.
Yeah.
Here, it's more decentralized.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for your advice, Jeff. Might help us here in this case. We are fighting for that because I think it's just a question of humanity for me. So thank you very much. Maybe Jeff, can we do now a little kind of game? I have some quotations from you, and I would just read them, and I would like you to comment a little bit on that. Okay?
We call this the lightning round.
Okay, good. Yeah, there's one. It hit me a lot. It was an announcement in July 2020. I will no longer seek the death penalty.
Yeah, I had sought as a DA and as a deputy DA the death penalty not very often, but we had sought it maybe 4 or 5 times since I've been DA, and I always had a philosophical idea that this was and this is how I would say it, like that in a moral society, this was the punishment that a moral society would say we have to impose for what this person did. And that's a very, very high standard when you say it that way. And I guess I sort of, you mentioned Plato, like in some sense, I guess I was thinking like in an ideal world, could there be a crime that someone commits or a person that has committed so many bad crimes that the state executing them would be justice? And in a perfect kind of world, in a perfect justice system without racism, without this, that, I thought the answer was yes.
Mm-hmm.
But what I just, and I didn't seek it very often, but I thought the answer was yes. And what I came to realize over time is it's not, we're not in a, I mean, of course I know we're not in a perfect society. We're not. We have all kinds of racism, all kinds of inequities. And I just don't think we live in a society where the state has the moral authority to kill someone. And you know, yes, there's money, there's resources, there's the possibility of a wrongful conviction. Yes, there's those things. But I really just felt like I can't do this anymore. I can't stand up and ask for this, knowing the imperfections in our criminal justice system. And you know, like anything, some people agree with that. Some are upset, even though we haven't had an execution in California in a long time. Some are upset by it. I think the people that are upset, some of them are worried that it's what we call a slippery slope, that, well, now there's no death penalty, now there's no life in prison without parole, now there's no punishment at all. Now that's what they're concerned about.
Okay. Thank you very much. Another quote is, treating every person fairly and with respect can make us all safer.
Yes. Oh, God, yes. I don't think that the way that you rehabilitate someone or help them rehabilitate themselves is only to punish them, is only to use sticks, is what we say, carrots and sticks. There also has to be positive reinforcement and role modeling and a supportive community. We're social animals as people, and you know, if just punishing people made them better, okay, maybe, then maybe that's what we should do. Maybe that's what's pragmatic and effective. I mean, it doesn't feel very like the right thing, but if that's what worked, but it doesn't. And, nobody raises their children and only punishes them. They also reward. And I think you need both of those things to help someone change. I mean, what I heard somebody say to me that I thought made a lot of sense was, my punishment is being in prison. That's the punishment, that I'm here. Not that I should be treated like dirt here.
Yeah.
And that, there was an inmate who's been released that said that, and that resonated with me. I also felt like that was something that would resonate somewhat with Americans. Like, I'm here. That's my punishment. Not that you should treat me horribly while I'm here. And we do things in this country like because we don't spend enough money on other things like whatever, good schools, then if we spend more money on good prisons, people say, why are you spending money on good prisons when my school is terrible?
Yeah.
And they argue it down. Like, if the school is crappy, then the prison should be even worse.
Even worse.
As opposed to, let's make the school, let's make it all better.
Lift it up. Yeah.
Let's lift it up rather than smash it down. So I just, I'm not naive. I do not have illusions. I know that there are some people that are in prison that are very scary and dangerous and have not changed. Okay, but there's a lot who are open to it, and we are just safer and better off when people come out of prison better people than they were before they went in.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jeff. I think slowly we are coming to an end. Maybe there is one nice one, one nice question. Imagine there would be a genie coming to you in the morning hours, and you have one wish. What would it be?
All right, I'm going to keep it in the criminal justice context.
I don't know.
I think my wish would be for our society collectively to take a deep breath, and look for balance. Okay. A deep breath and look for balance. I say that things are not black and white. There is not one, what we call a silver. I know, I feel like I'm speaking in so many idioms. There's not a silver bullet. There's not one thing that will solve everything.
Yeah.
Okay. And a balanced approach, which means you do a little of this, you do a little of that, you listen to these people, you listen to those people, like that kind of approach. There is there's an idea in Judaism that the world cannot exist if there was only accountability. We would say, use a different word, but it's saying if there was only strict accountability, the world could not exist, because people are going to make mistakes. They're going to commit crimes. They're going to do bad things. And if it's one strike and you're out, the world will fall apart. If there's only mercy and there's only second chances and rehabilitation, we're going to have anarchy. Like nobody's ever going to do the right thing. So you need both. You need this balance. And I just say, take a deep breath, because, it's a beautiful world.
Yeah.
and I know there's horrible, believe me, I know there are horrible things going on everywhere, but there's also wonderful things. And just clear your mind a little bit. So that would be my wish. Obviously, if it was for me personally, I would want my back not to hurt. I'd want to be younger, but that would be my wish for a deep breath and balance.
That's a good wish. It's about the mental state, the mindset of people also, and it's for everybody. And then it's good for you finally. And I bet you would have a better life yourself then.
I'm trying to do this myself. Yes.
Yeah, that's good. And it's funny. It reminds me. I have a little daughter, and she's asking me always philosophical question. I don't know why, but she's coming with these questions. And she was kind of, let's say, maybe 7 or 8, and she asked me, "Why is there good and bad?" And I thought, "Oh, that's a tough one." And then I started try to explain her. You need, in order to see light, you need dark and light. You need big and small. You need the opposites in order to be able to experience something, to perceive something, to find a way of changing things. And this is why we need good and bad, because otherwise we wouldn't see the good if we won't have a bad.
I think that's true. I think that's such a good answer.
Yeah. And she it was very funny, because then she was starting thinking, and then after a while she said to me, "Okay, now I understand you. If everything in the world would be blue, or color of blue, we wouldn't know what is the color of blue." Isn't it great?
That's really insightful. That's very deep, the way she said that. Like, she didn't say if everything in the world was the color of blue, then we wouldn't know what green is.
Yeah.
Well, right. But she's like, we wouldn't know what blue is. Yeah. That's very, she has your philosophical background.
Somehow, yeah.
So it's so nice to talk to you, Constantine.
Yeah, it was very nice, very relaxed, very insightful for me. And so thank you so much taking the time. I'm sure you have a very full schedule. So
yes, I'm running. Believe me, I'm running for re-election. And so this conversation is wonderful. I was a philosophy major. I thought it was either going to be a lawyer or a rabbi. I'm very interested in these questions. Of course, now when I go out and campaign, it's not that I'm going to say something that's not true to myself. It's just, I'm not going to be talking about Plato and philosophy.
Yeah, I understand. So I wish you big success for your re-election.
Thank you.
I think you are the right man. Absolutely. You're rare people like you. So let's keep in touch. Whenever you come to Germany, please give me a call.
Absolutely. I would like that.
So thank you very much.
Be well, Konstantin.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And you take care.
Ja, liebe Freunde zu Hause, wenn euch dieser Podcast gefällt, dann könnt ihr ihn natürlich unterstützen. Es gibt ein paar ganz einfache Dinge: liken, abonnieren, den Alarm drücken für das Abo, oder ihr geht auf unsere Patreon-Seite, die ihr unten findet im Fußtext. Dort könnt ihr uns natürlich auch finanziell unterstützen. Danke euch.